Hello, everyone. This is the Better, Bolder, Braver podcast. And you will also be seeing this on video if you're dialing in via YouTube. My name is Frances Khalasji. I am one of the co-founders of the Better, Bolder, Braver community. And today on the podcast, in this conversation, I am very happy to finally have my friend Matheson here talking. And in the first instance, I think, Matt, we should try to work out why we have connected on such a deep level, soul to soul, briefly, and maybe just tell people where we encountered each other. And then I'm going to be inviting you to go in deep to who you are. And, I'd love you to maybe, in telling us your story, tap into what it is you think I've got you on here for, because I haven't been in that explicit with you. But I'm really curious to know what it is you think I would like to talk to you about. And by all accounts, you are a very popular podcast guest at the moment. And so everyone's wanting a bit of Matt. But what is it, do you think, that I would like to hear from you? Yes, Matt, I think we met at Summercamp, did we not? And sat
Yep.
across the table from each other at dinner.
On
And
Friday.
on the Friday, gosh,
It was a
such
Friday. Yeah.
specificity.
That's it. I remember it well. Yeah.
What was your memory of that encounter?
My memory of that encounter was very quickly. We skipped the ball and just got into some pretty deep conversations. And what was the game we were playing? It was would you rather, I think it was, wasn't it?
That's right.
Like, would you rather do this or this? And
With Alan Wick.
with Adam Wick and with Charlie
Charlie.
Davis, yes, as well. Other amazing people that we both hold dear.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it just, what I remember about that moment and what I felt was just like, instantly I was like, oh, this is going to be a good conversation. This is going to be an interesting person to connect to. Because, and this isn't a plug for Better, Bolder, Braver, but my initial instinct and response to you is like, oh, that's a really bold woman. And I could just tell in like your line of questioning, and the way you're straighting, because of course I had some big stuff going on in my life, and it was like, right, let's just go straight to the meat, and like instantly able to have that kind of conversation. And that's what I remember about it. It was like very quickly straight in at that deeper, more authentic level, rather than just a kind of fluffy dinner time conversation. So that's what I remember, and instantly I was like, this is really cool. Something feels connected there.
I love that. Thank you. That's such a really beautiful recounting of it. And actually, it just took me very quickly back into, how I felt. And that little bubble that was you and me and Alan and Charlie, as you say, such dear people to us. And, just almost like a silence, even though there was so much noise going on with hundreds of people around us. Just that like very intimate, like almost like we're sitting around a fire, the four of us having that conversation. And
Yeah.
it wasn't even for very, very long. It wasn't like we were sitting there for hours and hours, but equally, as you felt, I think I looked at you and thought, here's one of my other friends for life. He's there. Okay, there's Matt. Oh, there you are, Matt.
Yeah.
And those friendships that just, oh God, thank God for that. And I say so often now, I think I just don't really do small talk very comfortably at all. And the older I get, the more okay I am with that, and the more I'm able to talk about that and talk to that. And it's almost like I have to excuse that, the directness of my nature sometimes. But what that also means is it's just incredibly lovely that I can just connect with the people that I want in my life so fast. So that's my memory of it. And I think, I'm not sure, we didn't really sort of talk about work too much actually there and then. But then we had a lovely encounter not long ago in Brighton where we were both working from Platform 9 and randomly sat opposite each other. And I think I asked you what you were up to, and you were coming to the end of your psychotherapy training, which maybe you can touch on a little bit in this conversation. And we had a bit of a like, oh, that's hilarious, I'm the daughter of a psychotherapist.
Yeah.
You're like, oh yeah, so that's another link. And also you were talking about, I think, putting together a proposal for some corporate consultancy work, and I thought, oh, amazing, I must talk to Matt. I'm just about to launch the Better Bolder Braver corporate offering, and the more I've gone into looking into what you do in preparation for this conversation, the more I've realized how many more points of connection there are between us. And so I'm really, really happy to be able to share this conversation with others, because I'm really hopeful that it's going to touch on a lot of what is really important to you and me in the work that we offer. And as I've said to you, I'm fluttering above the idea that you and I might one day actually maybe build something, collaborate on something, do something together, offer people something that yes, we can stand together facing outwards onto a crowd and talk to, as well as so intimately across the table to each other about.
Yeah,
so
love that.
Yeah. So tell us, Matt, in whatever order you want, who you are, what you bring into the world, please.
Yeah, cool. So who am I? So of course my name's Matt. My full name's actually Matthew Michael McLean Matheson. All the M's. There's a big story behind that, which is for probably another podcast, but it's rooted in adoption. So partly name change as adopted as a child. And what do I do? What do I bring to the world? So I guess on a purely practical level, I work as a coach in the space of self-expression. And that shows up as supporting people with helping them say what they need to say when it matters most, particularly in the realm of public speaking, communication, leadership, and then overcoming anxiety and finding confidence in their voice. And work with all sorts of folks, individuals, right the way through to corporates, which we've touched on a little bit. And that's kind of in a nutshell what I do. It's been an interesting journey getting there, kind of like realizing what my thing is. And I was happy to elaborate on a little bit. I was actually chatting to someone about this yesterday a little bit. There was kind of three threads from my world, if you like, that kind of converged into kind of bringing me into this space. And one of them was improv. Started studying improv about 17, 18 years ago. Gosh, it's going back a while now. And as I was working my way through all these courses, started to realize that when I scratched into the history of it, that improvisation as a framework, we know it as comedy in this kind of modern day, but actually, if you look at the history of it, it's actually a teaching framework for creative self-expression and collaboration and confidence. So I was like, oh, that was quite cool. So that was thread number one. Thread number two was I was working for a consultancy, Nixon McInnes. Charlie actually worked there as well, which was very much about encouraging us to bring our own offerings into the work that we do. So as I was starting to run more and more workshops, I was starting to weave in some of these improvisation activities to kind of loosen people up, get them to collaborate, etc., etc. So that was the second thing. It was that company that I worked for. And then the third thing was looking at my own personal patterns and journey. And I'd done quite a lot of work with the key turning point being a 10-day retreat in India, which was called A Journey of Self-Discovery, with a veteran leadership coach called David Ferez, who's 80 odd now. And we basically spent, a group of 10 of us spent 10 days just kind of answering questions about who we are, how we've showed up in our relationships, how we've showed up in life, what motivates us, what puts us off, all that kind of stuff, really deep coaching circles. And, through that and a bunch of other inverted commas work, kind of realized that there was a big subconscious part of me that was always trying to kind of help and motivate. And that was a natural strength of mine, as well as also a weakness when that was bleeding out in areas that it wasn't helpful. So kind of getting that distinction and bringing those three together kind of helped me kind of go, okay, I can kind of consciously channel that in my work, which then gives me an opportunity to not feel like I have to be there that way outside of my work, and almost start to kind of separate the two, even though they're both the one manifestation of me. So then over a number of years, more and more of doing this, more kind of set up my own business. And the one thing that kind of seemed to keep coming to me rather than things I was trying to go out and get was support with people finding their voice. So then I just doubled down on that as a brand. So the speaking coach is my brand, and then kind of just let that grow from there, really. So that's a kind of potted history, the three threads that came together to make me who I am and what I do at the moment, really.
Thank you. So, as is usually the case with these kind of lovely emergent conversations, there's a number of threads that we can pick up on. The two that are coming strongly to my mind now are whether we go down the sort of road of one part of that story, which I find fascinating, which is your what I call work balance, and how the various things that you do and hats that you wear do dovetail on a practical level. Because I think people listening to this podcast to date, my audience, if you like, has been in the main coaches that we help on a, you know, within a group setting and in a community, but also on a one-to-one basis with putting themselves out there in the world as coaches with more clarity and confidence and joy and creativity. And the work that I'm doing in the corporate space very much does mirror that for individuals. But I think, for, as I say, for people listening to this, that work balance of one-to-one and group and corporate and how do you do it, and that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And then the other thread is the I suppose what people might call the trauma hunter in me, which is, oh, interesting. So what you're saying there is I've allowed my work to contain something that's work for me that I've had to manage, and in some ways it's kind of manifested in a really positive way, and in other ways I've had to understand might not be how I should be in that moment, and almost your work has allowed you to package and contain something that, yeah, is still alive as work for you to do, basically. So which one are you most taken with as where we go next?
Oh, I think we could probably pick off both in some shape or form, because I think they'd both be useful to explore. The latter one sounds interesting because of the language you used around like containing and this, that, and the other. So that sounds quite interesting. I'll happily talk about both.
Well, I think you're right. They do dovetail, because when you
Yeah.
create a work balance mindfully and you are conscious and clear about your time, and Alan Wick is helping me so much with this,
Hmm.
and you scrutinize where you spend your time, you are having to exercise containment of your time, and you know all the things that we think about in the community that we are part of, the Happy Startup School, around pricing, and it's all in the service of providing for ourselves a sort of safe, contained playground with clear structures that allow us to move forward, learning, playing, and evolving, but in a sort of sustainable way. So the two do very much and need to always work in tandem. Yeah. Go on then.
Okay, cool. I'm just going to dive in and see what comes out. I think that's the best way. So I'm going to pick to the word contain that you said. So that's the word that stood out for me, around containing this thing that you're still doing work on. I think was a language that you landed on there. And I think the word that comes up for me, the way I see it actually is less about containing something, although I can see that works as well. And it's more about getting to a place where something that I was doing subconsciously becomes a conscious decision rather than an unconscious decision.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than just turning something into a conscious skill, something that I've been doing naturally, but not really thinking about, it's like just trying to help fix da 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 as I've kind of grown up, then starting to go, okay, if this is something I just feel like I'm really drawn to do, which, as you'll know, like 90% of therapists kind of have this thing. Some people call it people pleasing, whatever, you know. The exciting thing for me, and the kind of lens that I'm seeing it through at the moment at this stage in my life, is actually it's about being able to separate the unconscious from the conscious and go, okay, so if this is what I do and it seems to work, and I've been fortunate enough to discover coaching as a skill and improvisation as a skill that really lends itself to expressing this thing that I've got in a very structured way, then I get to take skills and things that I've learned, as well as this kind of innate need to help other people and kind of bring them together. So rather than it just being like a messy people pleasing thing, it's like, I actually know, wait a minute, I'm going to really channel this thing that felt messy and figure out how to make it something quite potent and powerful, because it's really quite conscious and considered. For me personally, that's kind of how I see it. And it also mirrors the journey that I've been on a little bit. So I've kind of discovered improv, discovered the difference between conscious communication and unconscious communication, and had my fingers burnt both personally and professionally, all this kind of stuff. So now I'm like, okay, I feel quite equipped to now help other people on that journey. And then outside of those spaces, am I still Matt? Am I still messy Matt that sometimes goes above and beyond when I don't need to, or screws things up, or takes it? Yeah, absolutely. You know, do I sometimes take over when I think I'm doing the right thing for everybody when actually I'm not? Yeah, that totally still happens. But as I've got older and maybe just a tiny little bit wiser, I've started to be able to kind of separate them a little bit and be a bit more conscious about stuff. So that's, I think, my view on that kind of containment statement. Yeah, and then the other one was around almost like different services and different ways of working with different people through that lens. So before we dive into that, is there anything you wanted to say in response? Because I saw you go, oh, but write something down. I was like, okay, where's her thought process going?
I mean, I've written down in big words, letters, writing, rather than it being a messy people pleasing thing, ... which I'd almost like to see as front and center on your website, because I just think that's so brilliant. It just smacks you in the face with self-awareness, and you know, it's just brilliant to call out the bull. You know, I often ask of our coaches in the Better, Bolder, Braver community, what bullshit are you calling? You know, sometimes people really struggle, I think, to articulate what really pisses them off and what they're trying to do something about, which is at the core of why they should do what they do, and what they should therefore be very quickly educating people that they are qualified to do, have empathy around, an authority to help people with, and a personal story to kind of be heard. And, you know, just the self-consciousness in what you say, rather than it being a messy people-pleasing thing, gives me a sense of safety that you have considered very carefully that you are at risk of people-pleasing, that you're at risk of, you know, being so much in service to yourself in your work that, you know, you have designed in a really conscious, intentional way an unmessy, clear service as a guide and not as the hero, and repackage stuff as opposed to changing loads of things up, just taken what could have on a different road in a sliding doors moment ended up being a really messy people pleasing person into something really, really beautiful that you've then become proud to share, at the same time while speaking to how you are a human being, and you know, you are who you are. So that's why I really liked that sentence, which I will probably draw to people's attention as the headline of this conversation, unless there is another mic drop moment later on, which there probably will be. So
Brilliant.
yeah,
Really...
so oh yes, let's definitely hear from you, Matt, about your the way in which you have decided to sort of divvy up your work, if you're happy to talk to that, because yeah, what do you spend your time on these days?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think I would definitely be lying if I said it's all beautifully laid out and it's the perfect client every time, because it's not. And I don't think that's the nature of how it works. So how do I work at the moment? So what's a good way to come into this? So I'll start with the kind of very simple kind of like different types of areas that I work on, and then I can talk about what it actually looks like on a weekly, monthly basis, maybe, in case that's useful. The different kind of areas that I work on are at kind of different scales. So if you imagine, if you take like Happy Startup or Alan Wick kind of level, your product pyramid, if you like, down at the bottom, which is the kind of easy access stuff, then there's the kind of content, podcast bits and, that kind of stuff, articles that I might write for people, that kind of stuff. And then kind of just coming up a level there is probably my kind of group cohorts that go through my 6-point speaker program. And that's by far my most well-rounded, proven, successful product. And it's been in its being in some shape or form for about 10 years. And I can trace it back to the very first iteration of it, which was a workshop I did for American Express 10 years ago. It was the very first iteration of that. And that's now a really, really clear, bespoke, but structured, held 6-step coaching package to help find your voice, basically. And that forms probably the vast majority of my work. Maybe 60%, 60 to 70% of people I work with go through that, whether that's a group coaching cohort, so a group of people I take through it, or people buy on a one-to-one coaching, so I can go deeper with them and go through that at a higher price point, or as a workshop. So very often people will bring me in and give me 10 people or 20 people, and I'll kind of take them through it experientially through the course of a day, through the 6 points. And that's kind of at that level. A lot of the other work that I also do is around transforming meeting cultures for people. So I'll work with a team or a company and work through a series of workshops with them, where I will take them through a 3-pillar workshop that focuses on communication, empathy, basic psychology, understanding different personality types, the challenges around speaking up versus those of us who speak up louder, and understanding why we come from these frames of reference, and then bring them down into, okay, then how do we design meetings within your organization? Now you know all this stuff about each other. So you've got this kind of self-awareness and communication empathy. So the structures that bring together the support and space that allows everybody to speak up and quietens the louder voices, and then the processes that will kind of bring those two together. And then the third pillar is putting it all into action, looking at engagement, so things don't get boring and this, that, and the other. So I do a lot of work around that. One of your questions that you said you might ask was like the kind of post-COVID thing. And actually that particular product was born out of COVID. So as soon as lockdown hit, I just started researching with all my clients what the challenges you're facing getting onto Zoom calls, and it was confidence, engagement, and culture online. So it's like, okay, that's where I then designed this. And then that's been great. And it's gone from an online offering to help people who are pivoting to actually something I do in the room with people now as like just a general cultural piece. That's a little bit further up. And then at the top of the pyramid really is bespoke one-to-one coaching and leadership development with communication as the focus. And then something that I'm launching this year is retreats. So 3-day offsite retreats, a lot more holistic transformation retreats to not just help people find their voice, but kind of come a level down and really press into and uncover that kind of authentic version of themselves, and then look at where that is and isn't showing up in life, and then start to chart some courses for maybe doing it a bit differently and expressing it a bit more where they're not. And that's kind of where I'm moving to now. So that's the different pots of work. What am I doing on a weekly, daily basis? Those come up. Yeah, anyone who's listened to this as freelance, it has peaks and troughs as a freelancer, and I still take on some of the kind of historical kind of work that I used to do around managing change programs and digital transformation pieces from time to time. Sometimes consult with people with that. It's mostly around how to get the best out of teams. I've got a client out in the Middle East that I've been working with for, about 7 years now. And I do a couple of projects a year with them, with a couple of trips out there a year. And that's kind of overseeing an ethical leadership rollout of policies and bits and pieces. So a little less on the coaching, but it's still again on kind of people. And the two kind of fluctuate a little bit like that, depending on where I'm at. So it's probably a 70-30 split, on 70% on the coaching and bits and pieces and stuff, and then 30% on these kind of more kind of oversight pieces. And then I do a day a week with T&M coaching, heading up their life coaching arm as well.
Just tell us a little bit about T&M in a
So
nutshell.
T&M, there's a couple of people in the community that are part of T&M actually as trainers, and they have, we have 3 business areas: the T&M business, the academy, and then life. So business is the corporate offering. So I do some of the leadership training for them, but they do bucket loads of leadership training and coaching, have done for 20 years. And there's the academy, that's ICF accredited coach training, and then there's life, and we produce workshops, digital programs where we source coaches with specialisms in certain areas. It might be anxiety, it might be motivation, it might be mindfulness, whatever it is, and then devise either on-demand or live products with them, sell them, bring people in with the kind of core purpose of helping people, kind of unleash their potential, really kind of tap into that thing. So I oversee all the operations for T&M Life and the products that go out alongside another person.
And for anyone listening, because I know David Pepper is part of that as well.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
What's the criteria for being able to be considered as a coach for T&M? Does one need to have a qualification as a coach in a particular?
No, really. So T&M, so they're fabulous. Like, it's very they've got all their boxes ticked. So, they're ICF accredited, all their training is ICF accredited, but they would never close their doors to a potential collaborator or network or associate purely based on whether or not you are ICF accredited. Because there's all sorts of training that happens. And, as we know, a lot of people in the life coaching world, they have all sorts of training. ICF's just one way of being accredited, but there's a million and one other things. So,
and this is a whole other conversation that you
really
could
is,
have,
absolutely.
because we talk about not being the coaching police, and we work incredibly closely with the likes of the Association for Coaching that we highly respect, and we offer, we're pleased that they have given our Coaches Marketing Journey course 32 points of continued professional development accreditation, so that if you are part of the Association for Coaching, you can earn those CPD points with us. We've got the greatest respect, but we also like to be inclusive. And to your point, there's plenty of incredibly qualified coaches out there that maybe aren't doing the best work. And then there's lots of people who haven't been privileged enough to enter into that sort of world of qualification and are also doing amazing work. So we've decided, because we're not experts in qualification matters, to leave that to someone else. And, we try to be creative in our approach to supporting what we call people helpers. So like I say, that's a whole other conversation. As is digital transformation. I'd forgotten that, because I think I mentioned to you at Summercamp, I used to work for government digital service, and so there's that whole digital transformation rabbit hole we could go down.
My background, as well. In digital,
yeah. So thank you. This is really helpful, I think, for people to hear, is that overview of, as I say, work balance. But it's not so much work balance, really, because so much of it's just so obviously related. So it's more your product portfolio, really, and sort of, yes, how you like to spend your time. And the other thing that we work on with our coaches in the community is, to try to get clear on what it is that's driving where they spend their time. And when you look at it, it might well be money. People need to pay bills, and for that reason, where we spend our time might be largely driven by how much we might earn from the work that we do. But then it might also be that, the work is incredibly rewarding on a personal basis, and that very much drives it. So I'm just wondering if you've got a sort of consciousness as to the sort of priorities that drive what you do, albeit it's in flux.
So do you mean on like a week by week, month by month basis, like
or even, what turns you on the most out of that power, the pyramid that you've painted for us, and I appreciate that, and just like niching is for now, I know that, this kind of thing that might be turning you on now, which is the retreats, is for now. And, it doesn't mean it's going to be like that forever. But at this point in time, what are you motivated by? Is it the money? Is it the, way in which it provides you with a mirror for your own self-work, as we've discussed? Is it the bigger picture system change that you feel that you're informing via the work? Is it the satisfaction that you get when you see a person going through the work? You know, what's the thing that
Yeah,
you
it's a
get
really
most
good
excited
question.
about?
It's a really good question. It's one I ask myself a lot because it kind of changes and it remains the same. And I realize that's a terrible answer. As an individual, I'm driven very much by emotion, and feeling and intuition rather than cold hard logic. Although I definitely have a logical side to my brain, but I tend to get drawn to what I feel I'm drawn to rather than what I think I need to do. And most of the time that works, and sometimes it doesn't. So, for example, the retreat is a manifestation of basically diving into something that I just felt drawn into and then thought, right, this is where I want to move my work. And the thing that I spent a long time diving into was almost like the intersection between kind of like psychology, spirituality, and science. And that kind of amazing space, because there's so much happening in that space at the moment. And it's like, oh, do you know that kind of space for transformation? So there was the kind of like, oh, just as almost like, not the word hobby, but just as a general interest, I was just consuming bucket loads of that kind of the research and the books and the talks, all in that kind of space that's emerging, and was just excited by it, you know. And then the other thing, so there's the kind of draw, if you like, the thing that I'm pulling towards, which kind of comes from here rather than up here. And then there's the thing that I'm starting to feel again. What am I trying to let go of, or what am I starting to lose energy about? And after doing certain types of coaching for a long, long time, there's that starting to, okay, I've done the same thing for a really long time. It's getting a bit repetitive coming in. So it's like, right, with that, that's kind of like, okay, my head's starting to turn that way a little bit. It seemed like, okay, now's the time to kind of link that up rather than just letting that go. So for me, like where I go tends to be more on like an impulse and a feeling rather than I struggle a little bit with designing long business plans and all that kind of stuff. So purpose work, if you like, you know, the core work, the coaching, all that stuff, that's kind of where I go. It's usually based on an intuition. On a more practical level, there are bills to pay on a monthly basis. And have there been times where, you know, I've kind of gone, oh gosh, I don't necessarily feel that drawn to this work, but I need to do it because I've got children and there's food that needs to go on the table and I've got a mortgage and all that stuff as well. So there's that kind of more practical day-to-day bits and pieces running alongside the more kind of softer shifting of pieces that tend to be more long-term. The kind of more vision pieces rather than, I think Alan would say, if we're bringing this into kind of cold hard business, kind of in the business and on the business. And, you know, as someone, and you'll know, someone whose business is kind of like driven by who they are a lot, the on the business is also on you. And then the in the business is that day to day, right? Okay, can I pull this invoice in early? Can I do that? Those kind of things. So it's a balance between the two. And whether that completely answered your question, I don't know, but that's kind of where and how I choose where to spend my time. So there's the immediate practical stuff. And then when that's not so much of a pressure, I definitely feel myself moving more to the intuition space and where there's stuff that excites me and where I want to kind of experiment a little bit. Yeah.
So my inclination with that, I think, is to ask you a bit well, my invitation is to drill down on why. Why is that work so interesting for you? And is there a bigger picture thing to which you could speak that would help market it? Because of course, what I'm also hearing is you talking about a very palatable shift that required after COVID, that you look at workshop development to tackle what you felt was a need at that time that has now manifested as a kind of in real life offering. I love that that's now that there's vocabulary like in real life that everybody understands as being
Yeah.
post-COVID.
Yeah.
But what I was hearing there was, on the one hand, you're saying, I just feel like I'm drawn to workshops because I was devouring to retreats because I was devouring a load of stuff about it. And I don't really know why, but I just was. With, as I said, invitation to think, well, might it have been that you yourself on an unconscious basis were very much reeling from, post-COVID, post-COVID. And so you are able to market those retreats as very much a kind of post-COVID, a reaction, a response, a processing of, your own processing of in the last few years has led you to these retreats. And so they're not only a mirror of your own personal journey post-COVID, but they're also a gift as a space for others, post-COVID, because we're all in the same time zone, right? You're providing something at the point that you yourself have come to it. So I don't know, I just wouldn't want you to not do yourself the justice that I think these retreats deserve, which is a reflection of the time, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right there. I think just to pull on one thread you said, it wasn't not knowing why. I think the desire for retreats and to move into this space more and to be a person holding this space has been born out of experiencing the space myself and kind of going, okay, this feels right for where I need to move as a next level. But it's a feeling rather than a, hey, this is going to make money, so I'm going to kind of set up this structure that will, so I just wanted to kind of check that there is a knowing, but it's a knowing that kind of comes from inside rather than a kind of societal or metric based knowing.
Sure. But what's so great is the ability to be able to go, but wait, that's great, because, and then what is the thing that actually earns you the money, or that is going to speak to other people, or that does make sense? Because it's very topical. And one of Simon and my favorite phrases is, it's almost like we knew what we were talking about, because we have these ideas and something does happen and then it seems to make sense a lot over there, which is something that we did not even consider. For example, I gave birth to this corporate product thinking, well, that makes perfect sense because I come with 20 years of experience in the corporate world around, corporate brand. I'm very motivated by working with people on an individual basis so that they feel significant. And then the first really weird thing that happened was that 2 days before I pressed go live on my website, Seth Godin dropped the Song of Significance, which if you haven't read,
I haven't, no. Okay.
And if you haven't read anyone, read it immediately. It's really easy to read. It's an easy read. But, our hero, Seth Godin, wrote a book, his latest book, about feeling significant in sort of in an age of AI. The robots are out to get us, the power of feeling significant at work. And I was like, well, if he's just dropped a book about it 2 days ago, I must be in the right place in my head. So that was nice. But then I also realized, having thought, well, I need to do this because it makes sense logically, because that's where I go first, because I've got this experience and I need to make money, and we can replicate a really proven thing that we've been running for 2 years really nicely over here and confidently, because we've done it there. And then I was like, 2 or 3 weeks later, realized I was also sitting on a gold mine of 50 coaches who I've been facilitating, looking after and getting to know in my community, who similarly to what you also are exposed to, all have very different amazing things that might be things I can collaborate with in delivering to corporates what I call your kind of personal brand work. And we've got Paul in our community who delivers workshops around developing your creativity. I've got Anjali who comes in and helps women who are returning to work after having children. And whilst they're all singularly trying to promote their own coaching businesses and with our support, they're also people with whom I could work in collaboration in delivering in a corporate space. And I hadn't even thought about that. So the point I'm trying to make is you sometimes do realize later why this makes perfect sense for other reasons. Anyway.
No, I
Yeah.
think it's a good point, and just something to add, like slight segue maybe, or divergent, whatever phrase you want to use, is that for a long time, I think I bought into this idea of like, oh, corporates are a certain way, so you can't work with them. Or, this kind of like more purpose-led work, it can be much harder to do that within a corporate, et cetera, et cetera. And actually, I've realized that's nonsense, complete nonsense, and that you can do this kind of work with that kind of client, because when it comes down to it, actually, it's still people within that organization. And, it might be packaged up a little bit differently, and it might be marketed a little bit differently. But, if I think about some of the big breakthroughs I've had with individuals that are miles away from the corporate space and are kind of here by choice, rather than being sent here by their boss, as it were, and very open, very vulnerable, very like, let's do the work kind of thing. And then I get given a team by, let's say, an international finance organization, and there's 25 of them, and they're from all over the globe. It's completely different. And do some of them not want to be there? Yeah. But there's always some people in that group who are just like, oh my gosh, bang, exactly the same, And it's like, and then that then starts to kind of change the dynamic in that group. And it's like, actually, wait a minute, we can get people in these really traditional cultures to start to open up a little bit more, to start to talk with each other. And yeah, you might have to do it through some slightly different lenses and policies. But actually, once you kind of work your way through the red tape and you have a group of people in a room, it's a group of people in a room. So I think my learning is like, actually, yes, go for the corporates as well. I don't think I'd want to solely work with corporates, definitely not. But I like the challenge it gives me as well, because it is very different to working with a group of people who are, say, freelance or already on a development journey, or this, that, and the other, to be dropped in. There's 4 people from China, 6 people from Ukraine, 2 people from America, 1 from like, it's like, bang, off you go. I learn an awful lot working with those people as well. So I think, yeah, just to speak to that idea that, oh, they're boring, you can't work with, nonsense. It's how you see it, how you enter into it.
I really appreciate that. I have written down the second mic drop moment, which was here by choice. And one of the things we talk about, Simon and I don't talk about very much, but we talk about it a lot. And that's something that we suggest people do as much as possible, is nail what their main messages are and talk about them as much as possible. And one of ours is around the journey of consciousness. And what I know is that I get really excited to work with people at what we call the kind of problem unaware stage level of awareness. People who don't know what they really want or need, but I kind of try to tease out through our marketing, and in my work with them. And Simon less so. Simon finds it quite not painful, but just would much rather be marketing to people who are what we call problem aware, people who know what they want to change. And then one level up is solution aware. So, those coaches who are just really bored about talking about what coaching even is, and just want to have conversations about why them, need to be working to and marketing to people, working with and marketing to people who really understand the value of coaching, as opposed to trying to convert people that have no idea what coaching is.
Yeah.
And it gets easier and easier to market the higher you are up the levels of awareness. But as I say, my sort of transition of turn on is problem unaware to problem aware. And that explains to me, and this is why I'm grateful to you, why I'm going there with this corporate work. Because it's going to give me such satisfaction to also be working with people who may not be here by choice, and make that transition in the work that we do to being here by choice. I also love your phrase, working through the red tape. And I would echo that, I would not want to do it all the time, but it very much feels like it's a very fruitful part of the ecosystem for me. And so thank you, because I'm very much at the point of needing reassurance, I think, around whether or not adding another thing in is a good idea, based on everything that Simon and I teach about focusing on a particular customer and sort of focusing your work. But it's a very thin line between be more focused and absolutely do something that completely complements the work and makes you look so much more qualified, because you are, if you are doing work over here to the people that you're doing work over there with, and vice versa, because it's cross-pollinating.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate that.
One of the things, just to kind of add one thing to that thread around corporates. So one of the things that brings me real satisfaction is something I don't see as much when I'm not working with corporates. And I see a lot more when I'm working in corporates, is an individual going from, I don't need this, to going at the other end and going, oh my gosh, how wrong was I? This is incredible. And someone has just gone from to heart open when they came in going, this is not for me, and that I see more in corporates. And I also actually see more of a hunger in individuals within corporates to then get on board with it and help other people, and help drive it, because they can see the challenges more than those who are by kind of willfully coming and entering into the work as individuals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. And I think this speaks to what we talk about in our community about pricing for outcome and not for time. Because to be able to speak to a person, a people helper in the workplace, so someone who works in a role in HR or learning and development, or is a leader really keen to kind of support their people, or a business owner who's feeling the sort of the disillusionment and sort of despondence amongst people in their company that they really love, to be able to speak to that just unbelievably dramatic transformation that might take place for one individual, and to be able to marry up the price of that with how much more you would be spending if you were consistently having to churn money into recruitment and outsourcing, and letting people go in a gentle way if they weren't right for the job. And it's just also just from the how it feels to go home at night and know that a person under your care has been able to make transformations because of what you've made a decision to invest in, I think is a hugely powerful thing for somebody in a position of authority and responsibility. And I think a lot about the parent-child dynamic when I think about leadership. And and another thing that occurred to me recently was I thought I was most qualified for this work because of as I've got two qualifications, or two university dissertations written about corporate identity, and I've worked in corporate responsibility and in brand and in marketing and PR and people stuff and people development and blah blah de blah. But actually I think what makes me most qualified is that I've given birth to and run a community for 2 years. So actually what I am most qualified in is how to make people feel seen, heard, understood, and part of a family. And that's what I think is most valuable, actually, is I can help you do that. So that's another thing that I'm really driven by and hadn't really thought about in the first place. So this is really helpful. Thanks, Matt. I wanted to share, have you read, actually, I think I might have asked you this because I wanted to share with you, have you read Johann Hari's Lost Connections?
No.
Okay. Another one I definitely would recommend, which is all about the causes of depression. And according to Johann, I wanted to ask you about this because I think it's so connected to both our work, but according to Johann Hari, the 9 causes of depression are as follows: 1, a disconnection from meaningful work; 2, disconnection from other people; 3, disconnection from meaningful values; 4, disconnection due to childhood trauma; 5, disconnection from status and respect; 6, disconnection from the natural world; 7, disconnection from a hopeful or secure future; and 8 and 9 both are in the realms of the real roles of genes and brain changes. And really what the book is on a mission to do is to sort of dispel this idea, if anyone still has it, that depression is just entirely down to inheritance and brain plasticity and just the brain, and that there's just so many other peripheral socioeconomic anthropological, sort of intergenerational, cultural reasons why we may or may not become depressed. And I just feel like so much of what you and I are doing in the workplace speaks to those 9 things, you know, disconnection from meaningful work, disconnection from other people, disconnection from meaningful values. You know, and for me, as I've mentioned to you before, I find that, you know, stories, connecting stories, can be a really useful tool to kind of bring up some of these points of disconnect. So I was just wondering if you could speak to what your equivalent tools are, if you like, or methods for kind of gently visiting some of these kind of quite raw reasons why people both become very depressed in themselves, but also might become completely disillusioned from work, and how we can help with that.
That's a good question. So I think the overarching philosophy is to do it gently. You know, the how, I think, is just as important as the what. Sometimes, if not more important, you know, when broaching these kind of things. And, you know, yesterday someone asked me, you know, like, they said to me, you know, what are the typical reasons that people have anxiety around, you know, speaking up, or, you know, a manifestation of some sort of block or depression around it? And, you know, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, you know, like once you continually start feeling you can't speak up, you start to feel really bad about that, and that brings you down. And one of the threads that we looked at, which I think is useful to reference here as well, is that often there is, and, you know, you've listed it here in one of the things, there's some sort of traumatic event that's taken place. And that could have been at childhood, where, you know, they've been silenced by a parent or an adult or something. So then the defense mechanism that shows up is that, oh, I'm not going to speak up, because when I do speak up, I get shot down. And then over a period of years, that just becomes subconscious behavior. And it becomes a feeling rather than a conscious awareness of what's going on. And it doesn't feel good. And it feels like you're not heard. And when you feel like you're not heard, you feel like you're not respected. You feel like your status isn't right. You don't feel like you can talk about your future. All these bits and pieces that you're coming into. So I think that's maybe like what can cause, another way of looking through the lens of the work I do, or we do, like what kind of causes some of that depression. So then coming to your original question, so it's maybe kind of come at the top and go, how would we come down and start working with it? For me, like through the language that I use and how I approach it, this is in what I would call like the mindset or nerves and anxiety space, because that's how this then manifests, you know, in the body or in your words or in your feelings, as anxiety or lack of confidence, etc. And I pull from cognitive behavioral therapy a little bit. So lots of like Socratic questioning and challenging and looking at different scenarios. Looking at, for me, there's a balance of mindset and psychological work and practical doing work. So evidence starts to get created to start to show how things can be different. So if we use the metaphor of a filing cabinet, and with, let's just say, public speaking, because that's the space that I work in, you know, the memories are the folders that are going into your filing cabinet, and at some point you get shot down for speaking, and then a black folder goes into the filing cabinet, you know, and that's what you call on. So the next time it comes up, you don't speak, so another black folder goes in the filing cabinet. The next time you have an opportunity, you don't speak, another black folder goes in that filing cabinet. And before you know it, you've filled up your recent, if not long-term history with the same behavior. And it's a behavior that you're not happy with, that's dark, that's part of your shadow side, if you like. And you start to lose sight of, where did this come from? Because that original folder's gone so far back. Okay. And I think the way I work and what I found to be pretty effective is a combination of, number one, gently just spending a little bit of time opening that filing cabinet and going right to the back and just seeing, okay, where's the root of it? You know, is there a root where this kind of started? Did you have green folders before the black ones started coming in? Just to kind of draw that line. So it's like, I can actually see where this has come from now. There's a reason for it. It's not just me, if that makes sense. I don't spend too long in that space, but I think it's useful. And then through understanding more about yourself, what your natural storytelling style is, how how you can feel authentic in your body, how you can feel authentic in your voice, and developing some skills, really, you can then start to take steps to put it into action, where it's in a safe space, usually on a coaching session with me, and then maybe testing it out in the world a little bit and coming back. So then all of a sudden you put a new blue folder in the filing cabinet, and you've still got loads of blacks, but we've got one blue there now. It's like, okay, so let's just copy that blue one and do that again until the ratio of black to blue starts to change. And the consistent now is more blue folders rather than black folders. But that will only come from action, not just thought. That's why I don't think like counseling alone is the perfect thing to solve this. It's a mixture of some of the theories around being gentle and looking what's happened, coupled with a more kind of coaching approach of taking action, but taking it in a safe, manageable way that can then be scaled up as you become more confident and you've got more blue folders in your cabinet. So that's kind of how I approach it.
I am so glad that I am friends with you, and my invitation live on this is to say I need you to speak to about my work more often, because you are helping me to feel so much more alive, even though I'm already very keen to get it out there about what it is I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and maybe to do it together. And you know, the other thing that you and I share, and you know, mindful of time, we're going to have to unfortunately wrap this conversation up for today. But I think a nice note to finish on is where you started, which was around improv. And of course, you know, I love, well, not of course, but I really love comedy, but I love satire. I love, you know, sort of dark humor. Being a post-Holocaust Jewish woman, I draw on wit, intellect, and trauma and marginalization. And, you know, I'm delighted to be a Jew at this time and to have a lineage of people who have, you know, risen out of the dust of shitness and made funny stuff out of it. And, you know, that mixed with my experience in the PR and marketing world means that my phrase, which is coming up a lot for me at the moment, is, as I've mentioned to you, you know, you'll be delighted to hear that. And, you know, what you're making me think is, you know, on those private coaching calls and in those moments that we have with people intimately, it's identifying, you know, what's going on for you, but, you know, is it comedy as well? That, you know, what's going to be the permission slip for you to frame in a way that feels safe, something that might be really bad news or something that might feel grating for somebody to hear. You know, what is, you know, for me, it's a press pack of information that I can gift to somebody on a, you know, at the press event. And you know, arm myself with the frequently asked questions at the back, arm myself with a biog of myself, arm myself with a press release that has the clear headlines, and that if you want to know any more, you know, here's where you go.
Yeah.
And it's my way of protecting myself. And the delighted to hear, you'll be delighted to hear, is the shit sandwich that everybody knows might be coming. And, you know, what is that? You know, what's your personal brand, which is a combination of comedy and, you know, whatever else it is, plus your voice, that allows you to kind of go into situations and people know what's coming, but in a, you know, we all have the compassion for who we are because we've worked it out and we've done the work. And then how does that serve others because they don't have those skills themselves, and how can you all dovetail together and be grateful that we're not all the same? So yeah, you're giving me so much to think about. What do you feel like you're leaving off from this comment? I hope something has been of use to you. It's certainly there's been loads for me, and I'm sure for everyone listening. But yeah, for you, is anything
Loads.
landed?
I kind of wish we were doing a 3-hour podcast.
I don't know if anyone else
I think
does.
we could talk, I know, because I think we could talk about loads and loads. It's a key thing I'm going to take from today. An awful lot. Do you know what? I love how so the lost connections piece that you brought up and the 9 reasons, like I'd never kind of seen it through that lens before. And for me personally, that kind of, I was able to go, oh gosh, I can really see in a different lens how all that contributes to what I have when folks come to me, you know, and some of the challenges I've been on myself. So like I'm stealing that.
Oh, definitely read the book.
Totally.
It's a great book.
I love
And
it.
props to Beth Derry, because she was the one that
She's
introduced
brilliant.
it to me. So, you know, absolutely one to I recommend to people. And thanks, Beth. Yeah. Lost
Yeah.
Connections. Johann.
I think I love that. And just having an opportunity, because sometimes I'm so busy in my work, kind of working with people, that I sometimes don't have the opportunity to step back and really reflect at this level on what brings people to me, to you, to us, and what it is we're actually working with. So to have a space to kind of drop down a level like we have today feels really good, because it kind of wakes me up again a little bit to what it is I'm doing and the sensitivities of it as well, to remember that as well. So I've found that very good, and I'm very grateful for that today.
Thank you so much, Matt. All right. Well, I'm sure this isn't the last time you'll be hearing from on, you know, the Matt and Francis show.
On new show.
Yeah. And I think I might call this podcast, rather than it being a messy people pleasing thing. I really hope that people have got out of this the way in which both of us are trying our very best to frame as kind guides a lot of our own work. So thank you so much. Much
Absolute
love to you.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'll put in the show notes, as it were, how you can find Matt. And Matt will once again be speaking at Summercamp this year. And word on the street is that there might be a few tickets left, but literally a handful. So that's the Happy Startup School Summercamp event happening in September. So you can find him there, and I will direct you to Matt's LinkedIn profile and website. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.